One of the discussions that I saw on one of these roundtable panel uh, videos or live streams or whatever that I find very interesting is different levels of role playing game table, a kind of rating system somewhat similar, at least in concept, to the rating system given movies, at least the one used here in America. I don't know how extensive that is. PG, PG-13R, all that sort of stuff. And the idea is that if you can rate what kind of table in that, or what kind of play you want, or what kind of players you want, it just saves everybody a lot of time and produces a better game, because you won't have like, if you just ask anybody to game, you might have the one who's all about role playing. You might have the player who's all about min maxing, and sometimes those different play styles don't work together, and they can ruin a whole game. It'll just deteriorate with that. So it had. I mean, I understand the intent, and on its face it sounds good, but there's some problems in that. If you subcategorizing people creates tribalism that creates conflict. Those stupid story gamers, those dumbass Groganards, those silly young people, those horrible old people, they're this compartmentalizing of everything causes a lot of division and problems, and not just in gaming. But anyway, so that's the problem. But the other thing is that, okay, so there's the ultimate beer and pretzels type of RPG game table, where everybody's just yucking it up, and it's more about cracking jokes and having fun and drinking beer or booze or whatever, and just hanging out with friends. Then there's people who are more serious. They put their phones away and they don't ever look at them, and they're actually spending some time playing the game instead of idle chit chat every 20 minutes or whatever. And it just kind of ramps up to, you got these people who are this rating that's so strong that you can't say certain words. You have to phrase questions in a certain way. All this sort of stuff. And the funny thing is, with the most extreme rating, it comes from people who wouldn't stop bitching about complexity. They didn't like a lot of rules. They didn't like being told to do certain things and all that. But all of a sudden, when it's something that they're interested in, and that's the deep role playing over rules or gaming, then they want to make it a very complex and detailed procedural system, where you have to remember not to do these things and always do these things, and you can't what they describe as break immersion. So it's an interesting concept, but I bring it up because I find that it really exemplifies the whole complexity versus simplicity thing. It really is something that people throw at something they dislike. And if it was a section of the story, or a section of the game, or the genre they like, heaping on a little more detail or a little complexity or being more in depth is interesting to them. Same thing with wargamers. There's wargamers that cried all the time about complex combat rules. You don't need that. You don't need that. They didn't like it. It wasn't that it was unrealistic or it was slowing the game down. They didn't like it. And what they did is they put all that same complexity they felt was such a horrible thing into a different area, command and control. And they were happy as a clam. But they were and before that it was logistics. And so it really is just a matter of people that have a specific niche within a niche, and they want to turn that portion up to 10 and everything else down, like a stereo equalizer. So I really don't take to heart that would be too complicated thing anymore. And I don't want to sound like I'm disregarding somebody's opinion all right, but it just, you know, it's become such an overused, multifaceted trope that it just, what does it really mean? You know, just come at it from a different angle. Whoops, want to make sure I was still on. That's why I picked this picture. You know, just different types of tables doing different things for different people. Um, so, and the other problem with it is, and I hate to be negative because I get where they're coming from, and it makes sense. You're trying to save time. Well, why put together a party that isn't going to gel? Because sometimes that's all it is. It isn't that your game was bad. It wasn't anything about time or complexity or any of that stuff. You just had a group of people that didn't gel. Um, and it falls apart because of those reasons. So finding people that are all of the like mind in that, hey, I want to play a serious role playing game. I don't want to play with somebody who's going to be checking his email every 5 minutes, or, you know, drinking a beer with his friend and making jokes. I want to play, you know, whatever. That that makes sense. But here's the thing. One of the things I've noticed about the way people conduct themselves that I brought up in the last video was that people will act a certain way on one platform and almost the polar opposite on another platform for whatever reason. Doesn't matter why at this point. All I'm saying, and there's a lack of self-awareness. There's people who are just hypercritical, you know, all sorts of things. So there are people that'll go, hey, I'll join the 3D or the level 3 because that's really where I think I am, and they're really not. And or maybe they're just not that day. They're tired, they're, you know, whatever it is. They're just in a different mood and they're a little bit off, and so they start playing or acting in a way that doesn't conform to that, you know, labels, rules or whatever. And it's still, it's going to break down. Role playing, like TV casts, there have been TV shows where you could just feel the awkwardness of the cast. You go, boy, I saw this guy or gal in another TV show and they were really great, but they kind of suck here. And it's just, there's no, you know, the cast doesn't have a chemistry. And I think that's why I'm having so much trouble getting people to play. They haven't maybe consciously identified that, but they subconsciously know it because they've experienced it in the past and they played so many times before where they go, well, we set this whole thing up, and it never goes all the way to fruition because Bob wants to min-max and Jane wants to role play and the other, you know, whatever it is, insert name and example. And they know it. So that's why people want every star to align before they commit to a game. And that's a rare thing. And that's why where I come from, where I had a group as a youngster, and then I played extensively at organized, not tournament, but things where they go, hey, we're, you know, you'd answer an ad, you know, before the internet, or at least before the internet was prolific and usable in your home. You'd answer an ad at the game store, and you'd show up, and it was with people who were really wanting to play. And of course, a lot of the distractions weren't there, like mobile phones and things like that. So that all worked. And then, but now, when you can just as easily or more conveniently flip a switch on your PlayStation, you know, or choose one of 1,000 different shows to watch on your streaming, you aren't going to get involved in that tabletop shit unless it's really going to pay off in every single way you want it to, whatever that desire is. And thusly, no one really plays. But they'll go to these things and they'll talk all day long, 3 or 4 hour sessions of discussion and pontificating and philosophizing about how a RPG could work. And the reason they're doing that is because they find the concept interesting, but they find the idea of connecting and playing a rarity. Or, as is the case with these people, they're a tight knit inherent group that play everybody else's games, and good for them. They have a social circle of players who will play online, even when most of them will go on the social sites and say playing online sucks and is stupid, but yet there they all are doing it. So that's an interesting little vibe. So I don't want to get too petty, and I don't want to get into too much of the psychology. But if you don't understand or identify some of these quirks in gamers, you're really going to have a problem trying to get a game together. And there's a lot of people talking out of both sides of their mouth and stuff like that. These guys never stop talking about how they're all a big family and all this sort of crap. And it's, we don't want to get into the, hating this, that, or the other thing. We just want to play. But they're a big clique that isn't half as welcoming as their lip service would pay on the stream, which is unfortunate. I'd love to play some games with them, but I've run into that before. There's a lot of war gamers playing on YouTube that I'd love to play with, but I don't pass a political purity test, so they won't play with me. And then they wonder why the hobby's dying. So, insular groups. So, one thing that all of that I just said about psychology and mean people and stuff like that, it may sound like whining, but it actually is an educational thing, because now I can see why some people are so averted to gaming. And it really has been an educational experience. It doesn't mean it's going to translate to more games for me. It gets to the point where I'm going to be like everybody else. I'm going to be making these things and selling them to a group of people that just like to buy them and page through them, and will probably never play them. And as far as me playing, well, that doesn't look like it's going to happen because of this weird, psychology that goes on through this hobby. So, the whole OSR thing is what brought me back to role-playing games. And because I thought they were being played again. But they are, because there's always some smart ass that'll come out there and go, "What are you talking about? I just played last week." Good for you. But in general, it is a very slim core element that plays amongst themselves, and elsewhere it's an extreme rarity, not any more frequent than it was 15 years ago when I threw up my arms and stopped looking for players locally. So, good news and bad news. There's a market for the material, but that market is about collecting and acquiring and rarely playing. So, there we go.